Greetings, dear anointed ones. The most perilous adversary is the one you are unaware of until they have already moved the furniture around in your head. It's a bad tendency of history to prove one thing. Seldom do those who alter the game make an announcement. Before capturing empires, Genghis Khan did not RSVP to them. The Trojan horse actually appeared as a present. Without firing a shot, viruses, the smallest living things on the planet, have destroyed whole civilizations. Why? Because the most deadly weapon has always been the element of surprise. And you were the epitome of that weapon in action. They believed they knew this story's characters. They believed they already had the story figured out, the conclusion written, and you securely confined to the part they had given you. Innocent supporting character, disposable extra. But you were quietly revising the whole screenplay while they were busy underestimating you. Indeed, they are currently turning the pages, perplexed by how they ended up as supporting characters. They were unaware that titles, approbation, or loudness were not the sources of your authority. It resulted from moving in ways they couldn't defend against, building in silence, and functioning in stealth mode. They anticipated fireworks. You turned into an earthquake instead. No warning, no countdown, just an abrupt, irrevocable shift. You didn't just show up, let's face it. You entered so quietly that you had already taken over the room, the plan, and most likely their favorite food before they even noticed. Hold on tight because we're going to reveal why they didn't see you coming, why they now see you as the most dangerous person in the arena, and why some of them are secretly looking up how to make friends with someone you previously doubted. First of all, you remained undetected until it was too late. You were in plain sight the entire time, so they didn't see you approaching. You weren't hiding because you were afraid or unsure. Since that was the most advantageous position you could have had, you were concealed. You kept your head down and let the noise to drown out the clamor while everyone else was vying for attention, yelling to prove themselves, and making announcements about every small action. After giving you a brief glance, they concluded you posed no threat. Their first and most significant error was that they placed you in a little box that they didn't even bother to secure. They believed you to be dependable, readable, and unable to upend the system they had established. They were unaware that you continued to appear normal to them every day. You were gaining progress in silence. You were studying their thoughts, their behaviors, their fears, and their blind spots. You were observing their habits, their conceit, and their leisure, while developing yourself in the background. The increase that no one measures is the most harmful. It's the type of thing that occurs when no one is watching. The underground roots that fracture concrete before anybody is aware of their presence. It was irreparable by the time they saw the indications of your ascent. Since you already had a say in what was served at the table, you weren't requesting a seat. Since you already held authority in realms they were unaware of, you weren't competing for recognition. They didn't anticipate that being ignored would turn into a weapon. Their modest expectations of you allowed you to get ready without any hindrance. Nobody was attempting to undermine what they were unable to observe. Nobody was obstructing doors that they were unaware you were approaching. They didn't believe you could move at all, therefore you were free to move. And there was no warning when you eventually came forward. You arrived without any commotion or showmanship. You arrived with outcomes. Unquestionable, unbreakable, and unforgettably erasable. You didn't just show from out of nowhere. You had always been there. They simply weren't listening. And now, the precise reason they are unable to stop you is because they are unable to recognize you for who you really are. Second, they evaluated you based on your shortcomings rather than your abilities. Instead of considering your potential, they evaluated you based on the boundaries they were aware of for themselves. They filtered all of their expectations of you through their own failures, worries, and insecurities. They felt that if something seemed difficult to them, it must be impossible for you as well. They anticipated that you would give up if they did at some time. They were constantly mistaken about your life because of this. They were using a broken ruler to measure you. They were unaware that you had been pushed well beyond your normal limits in terms of pain tolerance, tenacity, and endurance. The things you've previously survived weren't taken into account. The weight you've carried without anybody noticing. The nights you faced with nothing but grit keeping you together. In their thoughts, they thought that everyone was as strong as they were. They thus thought you would tap out long before you really did. So they prepared their traps and took their actions accordingly. They were unaware that you were still gathering your bearings when they anticipated you to tumble. You were only shifting gears when they believed you were done. They underestimated you, but that didn't stop you. It gave you energy. Each time they said you couldn't do something, you not only managed to do it, but you became an expert at it. You took it as a springboard to the next level after that. They continued to figure out when you would break, but they were unaware that you had already done so years before and survived. They couldn't conceive confronting some of the challenges themselves, so they assumed they would deter you. You've experienced worse, though. You've witnessed more difficult times, more severe storms, and more constrained spaces. Not only did you survive, but you also became more adroit inside them. They were never able to properly prepare for you because of this. You don't work inside their bounds. The ceiling they have is different from yours. Experiences that wouldn't last a week have helped you develop endurance. And they never came up with a plan that would have been effective in keeping you in check because they didn't think you were that resilient. Instead of battling against the actual you, they were fighting against the version of you that they had in their heads. They lost before they even got started because of this. Thirdly, you developed strength without anybody noticing. If you feel the abundance of divine love in your heart, now is the time to share it. You can help spread God's blessings by clicking the Super Thanks button on YouTube and contributing $20 or more. This divine gift will touch not only your life, but also the souls of many others through this platform. Each of you has a sacred place in God's great design, and your generosity will be the fruit of our prayers. Take action now. Share your blessings to exalt His kingdom, for you were created to do even greater things in God's loving hands. May God bless you. You were gaining power someplace they weren't even looking while they were busy protecting entrances and preventing you from entering specific places. They believed they had effectively restricted your reach by preventing you from using their networks and platforms. They didn't realize that standing on their platforms doesn't actually give you strength. It results from laying your own foundation in untouchable areas. You discovered early on that openly generated influence may be removed. However, influence that is ingrained in the shadows becomes impenetrable. You always found another way when they refused. You have to learn how to function without a door each time they shut one. They didn't even consider the materials you collected to be worthwhile. Developed connections they were unaware of and acquired abilities they didn't think you need. You weren't trying to win their favor. You were building such a varied and surprising arsenal that they would be powerless to stop you when you eventually made your move. They believed that being in the outdoors would make you weaker. You were actually purified by it. Get away from their control and their loudness. You learned how to work without an audience and under pressure. You taught yourself to function without continual acknowledgement. You gained a perilous degree of independence as a result, the sort they are unable to control, intimidate, or bribe. You were no longer reliant on their world by the time you returned. Building in secret has the advantage that no one can destroy something they cannot see. You were quietly amassing successes while they were busy vying for each other's attention. You are unexpected only because you have figured out how to hit from angles they never thought about. It wasn't because you suddenly become talented or resourceful that you were able to demonstrate outcomes. You had been like way for a long time, which is why you just didn't have to use their timetable to show it. It is now too late for them to realize that their vigilant eyes were directed in the incorrect direction. While you were constructing the city behind them, they were manning the gates. You didn't inherit your current level of influence. They are unable to reverse it because it was made at an untraceable location. It will never have to answer to your power since it was not born in their system. Fourth, they anticipated retaliation. Instead, you became an expert in strategy. They were sure that you would respond just as they would, with loud outbursts, obvious retribution, and rash actions intended to create a commotion if you ever managed to gain the upper hand. They prepared themselves for an emotional outburst, for the type of retaliation that thrives on mayhem but swiftly perishes. Since they only know how to employ that type of power, that was the only answer they could comprehend. But you didn't make them feel that way. You didn't get right into a fight that would quickly become heated. You went with something sharper, colder, and far more durable. You have perfected a tactic that avoids wasting time establishing a case at the last minute. Rather of striking blindly, you looked at the terrain. You discovered who really makes the decisions, where the true power lies, and the mechanisms that sustain their influence. Instead of shooting at individuals, you began destroying the barriers that keep them safe. They sense a loss of control as a result, but they are unable to identify the cause. They weren't ready to withstand a quiet change in the balance of power. They were ready to fight back. You were making subtle adjustments that completely rewired the board they were playing on while they were looking for spectacular movements. You made partnerships they didn't even know existed, placed yourself in locations they never would have considered guarding, and took pieces away without them noticing. Their influence had already begun to wane by the time they became aware of the situation. For you, this wasn't about getting even. It was about making sure that your place was irrevocably secured. Short-term victories that gave you an air of strength, but subsequently exposed you were not of interest to you. Making movements that would last long after their loudness subsided. You were playing for permanency. The weapon that outlasted their hostility was the same patience they mistakenly believed to be weakness. They are now unable to get out of their current situation. You subtly replaced the ground they were standing on, not because you yelled them down. They anticipated that you would struggle with your feelings. Rather, they encountered your approach, and they were never ready to prevail in that battle. The fifth is that your spiritual clearance was never taken into consideration. They never took into consideration the fact that you function at a level that is invisible to them and impossible to quantify. Every strategy they developed and implemented was intended to combat human limitations, anxieties, avarice, rage, and short-sightedness. They believed that you operated similarly to them, responding to threats, pressure, and manipulation in a predictable manner. They were unaware of the fact that your strength transcends human limitations. They are unable to touch or trace the background of your motions. The key distinction is that your clearance is spiritual. You are not subject to the normal regulations because of this invisible power. When you approach, traps they've spent weeks building up fall apart because you don't react to them the same way everyone else does. As you get around hurdles they thought were insurmountable, those who felt they could foresee your next move are left perplexed. The same individuals who conspired against you believe they are up against a human foe. However, your alignment is completely different. Things they didn't even think of when they thought they were in charge. They also fail to consider the impact this has on your timing and accuracy when they falter, pause, or make a mistake. You have an almost uncanny precision in your movements. Unaware that you can notice weaknesses they didn't even know existed, they leave gaps. Their attempts to corner you or influence results fail, since your advice is based on a completely different standard than theirs. Dear brothers and sisters, may God's peace be with you today. I am here to remind you of a profound truth. Our existence is grounded in God's divine plan, unshaken by the world's fleeting concerns. As the Holy Bible says, everything done in faith will be rewarded by God's abundant blessings. Luke 6 verse 38. Like that mighty oak tree, our roots are deeply anchored in God's universal truth. Every step we take, every stance we hold is secured by His power. And now, you have the opportunity to be a part of this blessing. When you click this Super Thanks button and make a $100 donation, this act will return to you 100-fold. Every action you take is infused with forethought, and they can't dispute the source of such insight. Because of this, they become frustrated more quickly than they can understand. They discover too late that they are not only vying for your intelligence, talent, or expertise. They are attempting to keep something they are unable to identify under control. A force that operates in ways that completely circumvent their defenses and recognizes their intents before they take action. They had no idea that your effect, timing, and influence would be indestructible in ways they cannot explain. It will be too late when they do realize. Their tactics fail, their authority wanes, and the same framework they used to stay in power loses its significance. You were never on the same playing field, so they didn't see this coming. You were given permission to relocate where they are unable to, and they had no idea how big of a challenge they faced. Sixth, you developed immunity to the weapons that were effective against other people. Every strategy they employed against others, every insult, every manipulation, and every effort to divert or exert control failed you. You just don't respond well to things that work on the normal person who gives in to pressure or breaks down at the slightest sign of treachery. Their strategies were intended to elicit a response, apprehension, or terror. However, you've developed immunity to it all. You became sharper, more resilient, and more untouchable with each strike that would have rendered someone else incapacitated. They were unaware that the effectiveness of their weaponry depended on a certain type of vulnerability. They flourished on uncertainty, anxiety, and the desire for approval. However, you don't function from any of those vulnerabilities. Every critique, gaslighting effort, and plot they devised to manipulate the story just served to expose their shortcomings and your flexibility. You were seeing their trends, picking up tips from their errors, and turning into a model for how to deal with people who don't want to be misled. You were more adept at anticipating their next move the more they attempted to throw you off balance. Your voice got sharper every time someone tried to quiet you. Your credibility was bolstered by every attempt to undermine you. Every diversion they threw at you served as patience and focus exercises. They were demonstrating to themselves their true inefficiency in the process. And you were showing the rest of the world how unstoppable you have grown. They believed that if you used the same tactics that worked for others, you would also get the same outcomes. They didn't take into account the fact that you've already pushed over your breaking point innumerable times, and that everyone has one. They failed to consider how self-mastery, perspective, and experience transform assaults into lessons, and lessons into power. Their tools are now worthless. Although you don't bend, they were ideal for those who do. They established a basis for themselves based on dominating others. And that foundation shattered when it came into contact with you. You turned into a living example of their mistakes. You weaponized endurance, and they weaponized control. They attempted to shatter you, but you became the benchmark they were unable to meet. Seventh, you mistook your tolerance for passivity. When they saw how patient you were, they thought you were weak. A subdued obedience that may be ignored, put aside, or disregarded. To them, every delay and deliberate move you took appeared to be a sign of doubt. They failed to see that your composure was not a sign of hesitation. It was a plan. You were observing, taking notes, and silently examining every aspect of the battlefield, their maneuvers, their statements, and their relationships, while they hurried, worried, and responded to every small threat. Without even realizing it, they were all showing themselves to you. They believed that the only approach to gain control was to move quickly and create noise. They were also unable to see that you had an edge that no one else could perceive because of your constraint. You weren't waiting passively. You were learning something new. You were identifying their vulnerabilities, gathering trends, and learning not just what they want, but also the lengths they would go to in order to have it. Your intuition was validated by every impatient move and overreach they made. You didn't have to consider several options or reconsider your strategy by the time you made the decision to take action. You already had everything planned out. You were perfectly aware of when to intervene, where to attack, and how to undermine their power in a way that they wouldn't anticipate. They squandered their patience, demonstrating their own limitations, while you were able to save energy and resources. What they thought was indifference became your hidden weapon. They believed that someone so calm and collected could never be harmful because of their conceit. They couldn't believe that the person who is planning the best reaction is the one who doesn't reply right away. And they were caught off guard, bewildered, and helpless when it was time for you to move. Because 1,000 rash attacks could never accomplish what your single well-considered blow did. It wasn't merely an error on their part to misinterpret patience as weakness. You got the advantage because of that. They fully exposed themselves, and you skillfully took advantage of it. It wasn't an action to wait. Control was the issue. It was intelligence that IT was the reason why there was no doubt about success when you finally made a move. You're not on the same battleground. Number 8. They are preoccupied with vying for titles, prestige, and fleeting triumphs because they believe that these are the markers of power. Every action they take is intended to impress, to take control of a stage they feel is important, to establish their superiority over those who share their lack of vision. Ignorant of the fact that the principles they follow are only successful inside their own realm, they gauge their impact by acknowledgement and acclaim. They are unable to touch you because they are engaged in conflicts that are irrelevant to the greater scheme of things. The plane on which you operate is very different. As they seek approval, you're destroying the mechanisms they depend on, changing results, and opening doors that nobody else even notices. You have an impact on things before they are even real, putting yourself in a position that renders their efforts moot, their strategies, their assaults, and their rivalry. Since you've already left the arena they occupy, they all land without incident. What they cannot see, they cannot comprehend. They believe that confrontation, loudness, and force are key components of triumph. Now is the perfect time to click the Super Thanks button on YouTube and share God's blessings. You can contribute to his plan and become a part of this divine mission with a donation of $100 or more. Every gift reflects God's generosity, and I believe it will return to you multiplied beyond your expectations. Remember, his protection and blessings are with you in every step you take and every donation you make. You become part of his divine plan. You are a powerful, radiant being, unshakable like his mighty rock. Witness God's miracles, feel the fruits of your generosity in your soul, and illuminate the world with this confidence and courage. Be blessed, and may the Lord's light guide your way. It all comes down to time, strategic placement, and leverage. The landscape has already transformed by the time they become aware that anything has changed. They are no longer bound by the same rules. Their tactics fail because you have already constructed a new battlefield, and they are made to function inside their constrained one. As a result, they believe it should be difficult to defeat you. Everything they attempt to throw at you only serves to show the gap between your long-term vision and their short-term thinking, and they aren't even in the same league. While you're impacting results at a structural level, they respond to moves at the surface level. Their victories are fleeting. Your influence endures forever. These days, every action they do is a response, a last-ditch effort to resist something that means nothing to you. Without ever entering the game they were playing, you have changed the entire game. And that is the type of legacy they cannot contest, the kind of power they cannot understand, and the kind of impact they cannot foresee. The ninth is that the currency you deal in was not recognized by them. They didn't grasp the type of wealth you were creating, therefore they couldn't see it. They use money, following, titles, and looks as indicators of success. That's what they expect. They thought you were concerned with the same scoreboard, pursuing the same prizes, and playing the same game. They were unaware that you deal in far more precious currencies: timing, honesty, and trust. No amount of money can purchase these types of assets, and no number of followers can duplicate them. You were subtly laying the groundwork for enduring and unshakable foundations, while others were preoccupied with accumulating fleeting and brittle influence. You can't take away the trust you've earned overnight. You cannot change or remove the truth in which you function. By mastering timing, you can make sure that every motion has the most possible impact. For now, these victories aren't very noteworthy. These are triumphs that change the course of events. You are aware of this, thus your authority is independent of other people's opinions. You are impenetrable in ways they could never have predicted, since you don't need recognition or prestige to prove your existence. They were ignorant to the depth of your approach because they were preoccupied with superficial metrics. They didn't realize that things fall apart without a basis, so they believed that accumulating money or followers would provide security. Any empire founded on flimsy gains has the potential to fall when a force like yours, based on invisible but indisputable currencies, enters its orbit. By turning their presumptions into opportunities and their errors into leverage, you not only survive, but flourish amid chaos. It's too late by the time they realize the change. They discover too late that their power was ephemeral, brittle, and recognition-dependent. You've been influencing results they can't control and piling successes they can't touch in the meanwhile. Because your riches functions on a separate plane, one that is genuine, enduring, and inherently unassailable. Their empire falters in your shadow, not because you directly assaulted it. The money you trade in was never acknowledged by them. Because of this, your power has always been inevitable, whereas theirs has always been transitory. 10. The exact anguish they used to try to kill you has become a weapon. Every hit, insult, and betrayal they inflicted was intended to shatter your spirit, weaken you, and make you smaller. They thought that sorrow would enslave you and that agony would confine you. They failed to realize that you had the ability to turn suffering into strength. Every scar turned into a weapon, and every wound became a tool. Your strength was built on the same things they believed would destroy you. You discovered how to persevere without losing your identity. You learned to take every blow, to bleed without breaking, and to transform into something more accurate and keen. Every attempt to harm you just made you more perceptive, more intuitive, and more determined. They trained you instead of attempting to destroy you. Each assault strengthened your resilience in ways that no one could see, much less take away. Those scars are now silent killers. They carry power even if they are not as obvious as shattered bones or bruises. When you enter a room, people sense the weight of your experience and the knowledge that you have overcome unimaginable adversity to emerge stronger. You no longer need to raise your voice to threaten them because of the pain they believed would make you look foolish. Each mark they made has evolved into a lesson, a plan, or a means of traversing the planet with unstoppable accuracy. They never took into consideration how you deal with pain. They believed that you would be broken by what breaks most people. However, they were mistaken. You've transformed betrayal into insight, pain into concentration, and vulnerability into armor. The exact things they believed would weaken you have turned into intangible weapons that they are unable to stop. Their attempts to manipulate or hurt you have already failed by the time they recognize it. Every action they took to undermine you has made you stronger in ways they are unable to undo. You're doing more than just surviving their assaults. They are the reason you are prospering. Pain turned become your ally. Your signals were scars. And the sound of every fight they believed would end your life is now audible in every room you visit. 11. They unknowingly groomed you. Every act of sabotage, treachery, every attempt to discredit you taught you a lesson you didn't even ask for. They believed they were teaching you obedience, dread, and uncertainty. In actuality, however, they were teaching you the most important information anybody could possess, the reality of human nature. They showed themselves in ways that no mentor, lecture, or book could have. You saw trends, motivations, and vulnerabilities, and you took it all in without their even realizing it. Each trap they constructed served as a model for evading control. Every deception they committed and every plan they carried out served as a lesson in strategy and judgment. Although their intention was to undermine you, they unintentionally enhanced your view. You discovered how to spot dishonesty before it was completely revealed. You developed the ability to foresee manipulation and subtly counter it. They were creating your map for a battlefield they could never have imagined, even if they believed they were containing you. Ironically, you used their darkest intents as a training ground. Every adversity and every instance of undervaluation or assault shaped you. It instilled perseverance, fortitude, and the capacity to transform hardship into strength. You acquired abilities they were unable to observe developing, abilities that function in a field outside of their understanding. They never understood that by attempting to shatter you, they were giving you all the tools you needed to escape their grasp. They are unable to track you because of this. On a plane they never planned for and never prepared for, they made a version of you. The lessons they unintentionally imparted, lessons they will never be able to duplicate or comprehend, are the foundation of the battleground you now traverse. Their meddling served as the impetus for your development, and the same institutions they believed would keep you in check ended up serving as a springboard for your power. It will be too late by the time they realize what has transpired. You are no longer subject to their expectations, playing by their rules, or traveling on their territory. They unknowingly groomed you, and now, every action you do is guided by knowledge gleaned from their own attempts to bring you down. They unwittingly created the same force they aimed to subdue, and as a result, you've become untouchable in ways they could never have predicted. 12. You are an expert at putting a stop to conflicts before they begin. You now know that using force or conflict isn't always the best method to gain actual power. You realize that the most deadly techniques are unseen, yet most people gauge power by who can yell louder or punch harder. You've become an expert at putting a stop to disputes before they even get started. You may make opposition fall apart on its own by reading intents, identifying vulnerabilities, and managing the energy flow around you. They only become aware of the existence of a combat after it has already ended. Since they only know confrontation, they anticipate it. They use loudness, violence, and an overpowering tactic to get ready for battle. They are unaware of your ability to change the mood, to cause their opponents to doubt themselves before acting, and to make resistance seem pointless or unachievable. They are destabilized only by your awareness, your timing, and your deliberate stance. You've mastered the art of influencing events without ever brandishing a blade. Because the battlefield itself yields to your comprehension, the fight comes to an end. Every time someone thinks about confronting you, your ability to control the situation makes sure their energy is expended before it even gets to you. You now know how to spot flaws in systems, alliances, and motives in addition to people. You may now manage outcomes without ever seeming to act by gently pushing circumstances, modifying timing, or letting others show their own mistakes. They may go believing they had made contact, but in fact, you have previously planned the situation, so you were always going to win. Quiet danger in your hands. It doesn't make an announcement. There is no need for spectacles. By the time they realize the change, their confidence has been damaged, their plans have been derailed, and their desire to fight has been destroyed. What would have been wars have been transformed into illusions by you. The resistance dissipates before it materializes. They are unable to adequately challenge you because of this. Although you work in environments where noise is irrelevant, they are ready for it. You've mastered the art of conflict-free control. You've mastered the art of disarming, destabilizing, and rerouting without ever entering the open conflict. That ability alone makes you more feared than any adversary could ever dream, more lethal than any weapon, and more unstoppable than any army. 13. You function without their acknowledgement or consent. Their authority over you is non-existent since you don't function according to their terms. They thrive on domineering individuals who require permission, want acceptance, and look to others for affirmation in order to feel safe. By making individuals reliant on recognition, they are able to sustain their control. You've severed that link completely. You may proceed without their appreciation, their applause, or even their nod. Since you're not following their rules, their methods of control just don't work on you. They are unable to blacklist, block, or cancel you since you were never depending on their approval in the first place. Assuming that everyone wanted to be inside, they erected barriers around influence. However, you have established your own network, system, and base. Since you've already established a council that is impervious to their meek attempts at control, you don't sit at their table. Your authority is impenetrable since it exists without their consent. Frustration develops when they see that their leverage against you is worthless. They start frantically trying to plot and bargain, but nothing succeeds since they are attempting to control someone who doesn't need to be controlled. You have the freedom to travel, choose, and seize possibilities. It's like pointing a stick at a shadow when they want to establish control. Pointless and ineffectual. The entire dynamic of power is altered when one operates without the desire for acknowledgement. You are developing, planning, and growing in ways they cannot see or affect, while they are putting forth effort to dominate, impress, or threaten. Only those who are afraid of them may use their power. Your power is innate, self-sustaining, and unchangeable. They are therefore unable to foresee your actions, outmaneuver you, or stop your progress. You've negated their control by taking yourself out of their validation cycle. You are now impenetrable, unstoppable, and autonomous. That's the reason they didn't see you coming. You alone control every action you do. Furthermore, no amount of outside validation can ever change your course. Since they never claimed your authority, their impact fades in your shadow. 14. Your triumph isn't a show. It's for long-term use. Applause, praise, or fleeting bragging rights are not the purpose of your win. Success isn't measured by the loud applause of the crowd or by flash and spectacle as they do. Their notion of victory is ephemeral, linked to instants that pass as fast as they come. You play a completely different game. Permanence, producing results, structures, and legacies that last long after the commotion has subsided, has always been your main concern. Every action and choice you make is intended to be permanent, to create an impression that cannot be removed. They respond to your activities and plan counterattacks because they believe they are in direct competition with you. The ground you're constructing on is far deeper than theirs, though, and they are unaware of this. You're creating a foundation that will outlive their whole impact as they rush for fleeting successes. Their wins are brittle, reliant on ephemeral circumstances and shaky coalitions. In contrast, your work is designed to withstand every storm, obstacle, and attempt to compromise it. It will be too late by the time people even start to realize how profound what you've done is. By then, history will have changed. By then, systems will have already evolved. Additionally, the rules they believed governed the game would no longer be in effect. Their awareness or consent is not necessary for your achievement. It develops on its own, silently, but irrevocably, until it is indisputable. They can't stop you because of this. They've been thinking in short-term terms, expecting quick pleasure, and seeking results right now. You've been working on timetables that are much longer than they can understand, producing results that are irreversible via minor setbacks or transient resistance. Because you've constructed your route to adapt, absorb, and thrive under pressure, every challenge they throw at you just serves to strengthen what you've created. Your triumph isn't a show. It is unavoidable, irreversible, and everlasting. It may live without praise, acknowledgement, or approval. It just is. History will have already been changed to your advantage by the time they realize what you've done. Furthermore, they will be unable to alter it. Since you weren't following their rules, they didn't see you coming. You function on a plane they can't even measure, which is why every expectation they established, every trap they constructed, and every assumption they made about you all failed. You were developing power in quiet, learning strategy, and using every assault, treachery, and challenge as fuel for your ascent, while they sought attention, control, and praise. You've perfected timing, weaponized suffering, and demolished systems without ever requesting authorization. You are untouchable, unexpected, and unstoppable because of your patience, wisdom, and union with forces others cannot understand. They believe they could stop you, control you, or terrify you. However, their equipment just made you more focused. Every action they took against you exposed their shortcomings and bolstered yours. You learned how to stop conflicts before they started, so you didn't have to attack on the spur of the moment. Because your achievement isn't fleeting, you don't measure triumph the same way others do. It's irreversible. History will have already changed in your favor by the time people realize how profound your effort is. You are greatly undervalued. You are quite resilient. You are a presence they cannot control, a legacy they cannot erase, and a force they cannot predict. Every mistaken move they made, every tactic they refined for others, and every effort to silence you have only helped you gain power. You are the epitome of patience, strategy, and invisible power. You accomplished more than simply make it through combat. You are an expert at it. Let's make this clear. To play their games is not why you are here. You are here to change the rules, rewrite the results, and make an irrevocable impression. They believed they could control you. They were mistaken. They were never able to stop you because you were always in charge, influencing reality. Now is your time. You will continue to rise. And those who had doubts about you will now have to see the entire scope of what they never anticipated. If this message resonated deeply with you, be sure to pay attention to what follows. Now subscribe to the channel. To demonstrate your strength, click the like button and leave a remark below. Tell us about yourself, your truth, or how something struck a chord with you. It is important for the world to know what occurs when the undervalued rise, so remember to share this with someone who needs to hear it. The movement is strengthened and the message is disseminated with each click, remark, and share. Make your presence known and take charge of your life. Together, let's disturb the system. May you be blessed.